The president announced a new 50% tariff on.
Over time, we become too dependent on the United States as our biggest customer, with more than 90% of our steel exports going south of the border.
They use tariffs to take our businesses, not only steel, other businesses too.
We must rely more on Canadian steel for Canadian projects.
On a humid June morning in 2025, the stroke of a pen in Washington unleashed a storm that would reshape North America's industrial landscape. President Donald Trump, ever the maestro of bold gestures, doubled down on his protectionist playbook with a proclamation that slapped a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. The decree, published in the Federal Register before the Beltway's morning traffic could snarl, sent shockwaves from the smoky mills of Hamilton, Ontario, to the silent assembly lines of Detroit. This wasn't merely a policy tweak, it was a seismic fracture in the intricate supply chain that binds the United States to Canada, its closest ally and the source of over 90% of its steel imports. By lunchtime, a ton of hot-rolled coil, priced at a modest $700 just days earlier, carried a staggering $900 sticker, a surcharge that threatened to strangle industries from Michigan's auto plants to Monterey's manufacturing hubs. The question wasn't just how America would weather this self-inflicted blow, but why a policy sold as a shield for U.S. jobs was already stalling factories, igniting a trade war and handing Canada a golden opportunity to rewrite the rules of global steel. The answers lie in a tangled web of politics, economics, and the law of unintended consequences, where every move on the board ripples far beyond the ink of a single signature. The tariff's impact was immediate and merciless. Within hours of the June 4th announcement, rail cars laden with Canadian steel ground to a halt at the border, their contents now priced out of reach for American buyers. Detroit, the pulsing heart of U.S. manufacturing, felt the chokehold first. At Ford's River Rouge plant, a sprawling complex that churns out the iconic F-150 pickup, presses fell silent, robots froze mid-motion, and night shift workers faced the grim prospect of furloughs. Each F-150, swallowing roughly a ton of steel, now carried a $900 metal bill per truck. For Ford's planned 2025 run of 1.5 million trucks, the math was apocalyptic. A $1.3 billion hit before factoring in wages, paint, or a single bolt.
CEO Jim Farley, speaking at a May 7th investor call, didn't sugarcoat the damage. The tariff, he warned, would slap a $2.5 billion surcharge on Ford's books, forcing the company to abandon its profit forecast and brace for a year of red ink.
Dealerships from San Antonio to Seattle scrambled to cope, tacking temporary surcharges onto import-heavy models as factory order banks dwindled to a trickle. Showroom shoppers, already battered by post-pandemic inflation, faced sticker shock that turned mid-size crossovers into luxury purchases overnight.
Small businesses, from diners to auto parts stores, felt the pinch as consumer spending dried up. In Flint, a city still scarred by its water crisis, the tariffs' fallout stirred memories of the 2008 recession, when General Motors' bankruptcy left entire neighborhoods hollowed out. This time the culprit wasn't a global financial meltdown, but a policy born in Washington, sold as a lifeline for the very workers it now sidelined. Capitol Hill, rarely known for agility, stirred under the pressure. On July 21st, a bipartisan delegation of Great Lakes senators, Democrats from Michigan, Republicans from Ohio, crossed into Ottawa, hats in hand, to plead with Carney for relief from what they called a metal blockade. Their mission was urgent: loosen Canada's grip on steel or risk a Rust Belt collapse. Carney, unmoved, offered only vague promises of dialogue, doubling down on export quotas that would keep more steel in Canada for domestic projects and global markets. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, sensing the moment, signed a memorandum that locked U.S. pipe mills out of the bidding process for new oil, mineral, and infrastructure projects. Every pipeline, rail spur, and service road would now use Ontario melted steel, redirecting 6.56 million tons of Canadian metal, including over 1 million tons of line pipe, away from U.S. customs booths. For American energy contractors, the blow was immediate and brutal. Before the tariff war, Canada and Mexico supplied 16% of the U.S. quote. Oil country tubular goods, the heavy-duty pipes that keep wells pumping. Now, with landed costs projected to jump 15%, small drillers in Texas and North Dakota struggled to secure deliveries, while midstream firms watched $100 million bids vanish into the ether. Maintenance crews, desperate for replacement joints, resorted to cannibalizing stockpiles, leaving critical infrastructure vulnerable. This shielded Canadian mills while positioning them as Europe's preferred supplier. Consultancy Anthesis, in a February 2025 brief, hailed Canada's low-carbon steel as CBAM-ready, poised to outmaneuver higher-emission rivals. Every truckload that once rumbled south to Michigan could now pivot east to Rotterdam, commanding a premium while sidestepping Trump's tariff wall. Alberta's energy sector, undeterred by the trade war, leaned into the clean steel advantage, framing it as a matter of energy security. The province's treasury reaped the rewards, pocketing fabrication work and political capital while U.S. suppliers stared at empty order books.
In Hamilton, steelworkers like Jamal Carter, a 30-year-old furnace operator, found themselves working overtime for the first time in years. "We're not just making steel," Carter told a CBC crew, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're building Canada's future."
The contrast with Detroit's idled plants couldn't have been starker. The tariffs fallout laid bare a deeper truth. Protectionism, for all its populist appeal, rarely delivers clean victories. Trump's 50% levy, sold as a bulwark for American jobs, had instead starved Motor City of its most vital resource, handing Canada a strategic edge in the global steel market. The cost? An estimated 200,000 U.S. jobs lost as industries dependent on affordable steel, autos, construction appliances, buckled under higher costs. Trump's 2018 tariffs, which started at 25% on steel, followed a similar arc, sparking retaliation from Canada and others before exemptions were negotiated. This time, the stakes were higher. The 50% levy, double the 2018 rate, wasn't just a bargaining chip, it was a sledgehammer that shattered supply chains at a time when global trade was already fraying. China, watching from the sidelines, quietly ramped up steel exports to Asia, filling the void left by Canada's pivot to Europe. Beijing's state-backed mills, though less green than Canada's, offered prices U.S. buyers couldn't match, tariff or no tariff. The global chessboard was shifting, and America risked being checkmated by its own opening move.
For Main Street, the stakes were deeply personal. In Michigan, laid-off workers like Maria Delgado faced a 2008-style economic rerun, with no bailout on the horizon. Families across the Rust Belt felt the squeeze as car prices climbed and grocery budgets shrank. In Flint, community leaders like Pastor James Carter organized town halls to address the growing despair. The ripple effects reached beyond manufacturing. In Texas, small drillers like Lone Star Energy cut exploration budgets, unable to secure pipe at pre-tariff prices. In North Dakota, rig workers faced layoffs as maintenance schedules stalled. Even farmers, reliant on steel for equipment, saw costs creep upward, squeezing already thin margins. Canada, by contrast, was scripting a new narrative of resilience and ambition. Its mills, powered by hydro and nuclear, weren't just producing steel. They were forging a model of industrial reinvention. Carney's Modernization Fund, coupled with strategic trade quotas, positioned Canada as a clean steel superpower, ready to meet Europe's CBAM and Asia's growing demand. The city's mayor, speaking at a mill groundbreaking, called it our moonshot moment, a nod to the transformative potential of clean industry. The question now is whether Washington can pivot before the damage becomes permanent. A clean steel moonshot, mirroring Canada's, could reposition the U.S. as a global leader, but it would demand billions in public investment and a bipartisan will that's been absent amid polarized gridlock. Doubling down on tariffs, meanwhile, risks isolating the U.S. further as allies like Canada and markets like Europe forge ahead. The steel tariff gambit meant to protect American industry has instead exposed its fragility, turning a neighbor's mills into a global powerhouse and leaving Detroit's factories in the dark. The world isn't waiting, and neither is the supply chain. As Hamilton's furnaces burn bright, Washington must decide whether to defuse this tariff time bomb or watch its industrial heartland rust. The next move is America's, but the clock is ticking and the board belongs to the world.